4, 3, 2, 1. One of you just died. 4, 3, 2, 1. Another one dead. Don't worry, we're not going to be playing some sort of dystopian game I just invented. This is actually a game bleaker than that. Because this is the rate at which people across the globe are dying due to tobacco use. Every 4 seconds, one person dies. Each life and each death entirely preventable. Each life cut short by what many still consider a personal choice. But here's what most of us still don't realize. Smoking is not a free choice at all. Almost 70% of people who smoke say that they want to stop, but they simply cannot. And on average, it takes up to 30 attempts to stop smoking for good. Meanwhile, the tobacco industry is profiting massively off of this addiction. Big Tobacco is bigger in revenue than Apple, Google, and Meta combined. I know, these are quite shocking facts. Terrible facts, I would say. Now, what's even more terrible is that I used to work for Big Tobacco. But today, I work really hard to completely abolish their existence. Because something happened to me along the way that made me realize that the very best way to change the world is to change your career. For the past 12 years, I worked in advertising. I did my internship at an agency, and I just loved it so much that I didn't even finish my master's degree. The glitz, the glamour, the photo shoots, the award shows, the parties, I just knew that I had to be there. And so one of my very first meetings as a 20-year-old junior employee was a meeting at a pretty gray, typical industry park somewhere in Flanders, Belgium. There was no hip logo at the door, there were no cool office spaces. It was actually a pretty boring TL-lighted office. But nevertheless, we were meeting with the directors of marketing and sales of one of the biggest tobacco companies in the world. 5 minutes into the meeting, they blatantly told us that they are looking for ways to advertise hand-rolled tobacco to what they called young adults, but what we of course should all translate as teenagers. And back then, advertising on radio or TV or social media was already not allowed anymore as a tobacco company. So they tasked us with finding ways to bypass the regulation. So we had to reach teenagers while not using the regulated channels. And I remember going back at the agency, and I also remember the moment when we found the idea. We actually thought it was a pretty genius idea, the one we came up with. Because you see, the type of tobacco that we were supposed to advertise was the type of tobacco you would roll with the use of a machine. A little device where you would put all your ingredients in, and then it would shoot out a ready-to-smoke cigarette. And so we were inspired back then by the Share a Coke campaign, if you remember. You would buy 1 can, but then you would get 2 cans, one for yourself, and then one you could share with a friend. So what did we come up with? We came up with a new type of device, where when a tea would use it, you would put in all the ingredients, and it would shoot out not 1 cigarette, but 2 cigarettes at a time. Of course, that's not really handy, so you would use 1 cigarette for yourself and then share one with your friends, so you can both become addicted together. And I always feel a bit ashamed when I tell this story now, but back then, it was kind of business as usual. You know, me and my coworkers, we never really spoke about the second-order consequences, such as addiction and death. We mainly spoke about how clever and how creative we thought the idea was. And to be honest, this was not the last time I worked for the bad bags. I actually, when my career in advertising, when it progressed, my list of clients started looking something like this, where I had done a couple of beautiful campaigns for NGOs or for charities, but most of my time was spent working for questionable corporates where profit was the only goal, no matter what the cost to people or no matter what the cost to planets. And looking back now, I can see that my job and my employer were actually really good at keeping me distracted. I was constantly getting raises, bonuses, a bigger team, a bigger office, more travel, further travel, bigger parties. And it kind of felt like my career was this one big slot machine. That every time I was getting distracted or demotivated, I would just, pull the lever or push the button, and something else would come out that would still keep me going. And before I knew it, I was used to, and I would say even addicted to the lifestyle I had. But of course, there were moments where I questioned what I was doing. I think, like many of us, most of the time when I would watch the news, I would see overconsumption, climate change, animal cruelty. But still, most of the time, I would not really respond. I would retract in my bubble, I would laugh it all away, I would distract myself with something else, or I would even become a little bit fatalistic. It's like my friends often say when they smoke a cigarette. They say, I'm dying anyway, and the world is burning anyway, so what difference does one more cigarette make? But I see now that fatalism was actually some sort of powerlessness. I was flourishing in my job, I was very successful, but then on the other hand, I felt that the world was burning, but I still didn't really know what to do about it. I felt too progressed, too comfortable in my career to really question it. And I had bills coming in and paycheck at the end of the month, so why would I question what I was doing? But then about a year ago now, something changed my entire outlook on careers. Because it turned out I was not the only one questioning their legacy and the impact that their career was having. Because then this book was written, Moral Ambition by the Dutch historian Rutger. And in this book, he wrote the following. He said, "The greatest waste of this time is the waste of talent. And many people are stuck in pointless or bullshit jobs that only leave the world worse off." And he also wrote that moral ambition wants to challenge the definition of success. That it should not be about the size of your office or even the size of your paycheck, but that it should be about solving the world's biggest problems. And I remember reading those lines and my mind was blown because suddenly I knew that that was true and that I had to do something. And luckily for me, Rutger did put those words into action because he co-founded the School for Moral Ambition, which is an organization that has as a purpose to help people figure out a way out of their careers. People that are looking to devote their time to something more meaningful, like big tobacco, or maybe even a more sustainable food system. And there it was, a wake-up call, a perspective, a way out for me. And the best part was that I would not have to do it alone, because other people would also be attracted to the program, which they called the fellowship. Other people would also be attracted. People also looking for ways to change their career to something more meaningful. And so soon, together with 9 other fellows, ironically, given my past, I joined the fight against big tobacco, which is a big problem in dire need of more energy, more attention, more manpower. And soon I was making my way through the webs of tobacco control organizations, which there are many. But to my surprise, the thing that I found was that the biggest fights against big tobacco were often won because of one thing. A person or a group of people relentlessly fighting, often way beyond their job description, way beyond their working hours, and even way beyond the doubt whether they would be successful or not. And so I've been super fortunate to meet many role models, people of whom I had never heard of, and I think you probably won't know them either. But people that have shown that it's specific people that can have a big influence on how world problems are solved. So let me tell or share 2 stories of people I met with you. First of all, there's Warmba. From Wanda, I learned that if you want to solve big problems, you need to focus on where the power lies. Wanda is a Dutch lung doctor who, of course, was treating many smoking-related illnesses. At a certain point, she realized that it would be way more effective, instead of treating sick patients, to address the root cause of the problem. So together with one of her patients, Anne-Marie, who was a terminal lung cancer patient, she launched a lawsuit against the tobacco industry. And they wanted to hold the industry accountable for knowingly causing harm. That court case, it gained global attention, and it helped, especially tobacco control, to really shift the narrative from looking at smoking as a personal choice to something we should hold corporates accountable for. And Wanda is now one of the most and only outspoken anti-tobacco activists in our world. She does that full time. So be like Wanda, and instead of wasting your time focusing on solving the consequences of a big problem, you have to aim at eliminating the core of the power. Secondly, meet Patricia. She served as a legal advisor during the presidency of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. From Patricia, I learned that the very best way to protect millions of lives is to focus on legislation, instead of doing individual interventions. Patricia, she was one of the lead negotiators during a negotiation on the Global Treaty on Tobacco Control, which is a huge piece of legislation where you need more than 100 countries to sign off on it. And for weeks, the delegates negotiated until the very early mornings. But at the very last evening of the convening, there still was no agreement. And Patricia was exhausted and also getting a bit desperate because she wanted the convene to be a big success. So at 3 a.m., the very early morning, she was still up and she was trying to find a way out of this situation. She looked at suggestions she had been given to find a way out of it, and her eye fell on a specific wording change by a certain NGO. She acted really quickly. She compared it to her official version of the speech she was going to give, and she decided to use the new wording. And guess what? It worked. Right that morning, before the checkout, the treaty was finalized and later signed by over 100 countries. This specific treaty, and also that moment in time, is now the reason why we're not allowed to smoke inside of restaurants, so all of us are protected. Or why, for example, we have health warnings on cigarette packs. So be like Patricia. Value the role of legislation, and know that even there, it does come down to people, specific people, relentlessly fighting for the greater good. And of course, there's been many more people very instrumental in the fight against big tobacco. And my story, this story is not a story of perfection. I'm also still trying to find my way. But now when I look back to my past career, I realized that there were just a couple of things I didn't know. Things that I will now remember for the rest of my life, and maybe you will too. Because firstly, I just didn't know that it was possible. It is possible to turn your life around and to try using your influence for good. Because I didn't know that it was people. It's people who change the world. It's people who change the systems, not just by recycling our plastic or eating less meat, but especially when we focus and really rethink the role of our careers. Secondly, we do that even better when we focus on the role of legislation and when we focus on where the power lies. And thirdly, and to put it quite simply, I just didn't know that the very best way to change the world is to change your career. So, it's been over 13 minutes, around 13 minutes since I started talking. 13 minutes or 195 bits. Look around. We all are not here anymore. More than us. So the question is not whether you have influence. The question is, what will you do with it? Thank you.